You look at a garbage truck and you see a smell you want to get away from. The waste industry looks at that same truck and sees one of the most dependable cash machines in the American economy. Every single day, without a marketing campaign, without a launch event, without anyone posting about it on social media, that truck collects money from millions of households who have no choice but to pay. It doesn't matter if the economy is booming or falling apart. People still throw things away. Companies still generate waste. Cities still need it gone. And somebody, somewhere, is getting paid every time a bag hits the curb. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a business built on trash generates more reliable profit than most tech startups ever will, why two companies you've probably never thought twice about are worth a combined $150 billion, and why the barrier standing between an ordinary person and this industry isn't smarts. It's capital, permits, and patience. If you're serious about understanding how boring businesses quietly become the best businesses, this is the one that proves it better than almost any other industry out there. Here's what's coming: the actual size of the global waste industry, and why it dwarfs businesses that get 10 times the attention. And here's why it matters. If you're trying to understand where real, durable money sits in the economy, you can't just look at what's trending. You have to look at what people are forced to pay for no matter what. Waste sits at the top of that list, and almost nobody clocks it. The global waste management market was valued at roughly $1.5 trillion in 2025. Say that number slowly. $1.5 trillion. That's larger than the global film and music industries combined, several times over. It's larger than the global airline industry. It's an industry most people can't name a single company from, and it's already bigger than half the industries plastered across business news every week. North America alone accounts for around a third of that total. And the reason is simple: high consumption, high regulation, and a population that generates waste faster than almost anywhere on Earth. The United States alone produces hundreds of millions of tons of waste every year, and every ton of it needs somewhere to go. The industry isn't shrinking either. Forecasts put it growing at somewhere between 4 and 6% a year through the early 2030s, pushing toward $2 trillion in market size. Population growth alone guarantees more waste. Urbanization guarantees more waste. Regulation, ironically, doesn't reduce the money in the system. It usually increases it because compliance costs money and somebody has to manage it. So the first thing to understand about garbage is scale. This isn't a niche. It's one of the largest, least glamorous, most overlooked industries on the planet. And size like that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because everyone, everywhere produces waste, and almost nobody wants to deal with it themselves. Here's what's coming: the mechanism that makes garbage one of the strangest, most favorable business models in existence. And here's why it matters. Most businesses have to convince a customer to buy. This one gets paid the moment the customer wants to get rid of something, which flips the entire sales problem most companies fight every day of their existence. Picture a normal business. A restaurant has to convince you their food is worth your money. A retailer has to convince you their product beats the one next door. Waste companies don't have that problem because the product isn't something people want. It's something people are desperate to be rid of. That's the entire foundation of the industry, and it's called the tipping fee. A tipping fee, sometimes called a gate fee, is what a landfill charges anyone who shows up to dump waste there. As of the most recent nationwide data, the average tipping fee in the United States sits at just over $62 a ton. That number isn't fixed. In Mississippi, it can run as low as $32 a ton. In Alaska, where land, transport, and infrastructure are brutally expensive, it climbs past $124 a ton. Every single truck that pulls up to that gate pays before a single item is unloaded. Now think about what that actually means for the landfill owner. They're not selling anything. They're not manufacturing anything. They own a hole in the ground with a permit attached to it, and every truck in a region that needs somewhere to dump pays them just to use it. Multiply that by every hauling company, every construction site, every municipality in the surrounding area, and you have a business model where demand is guaranteed and the customer arrives already desperate to pay. That's the real engine underneath the entire industry. Everything else, the trucks, the recycling plants, the sorting facilities, sits on top of this one basic fact. Somebody somewhere is always going to need a place to put their trash, and whoever owns that place gets paid first. Here's what's coming. How one company turned picking up trash into a business worth more than most banks. And here's why it matters. If tipping fees are the engine, the biggest waste companies are proof of what happens when you stack that engine across an entire country, decade after decade, without anyone noticing how big it got. Waste Management, the largest company in this industry, generated just over $25 billion in revenue in 2025. Net income landed around $2.7 billion. Gross margin sat above 40%, and operating margin came in at 17%, numbers that would make most retail or hospitality businesses jealous, especially considering this is a company driving trucks and running landfills, not selling software. The company didn't get there by being flashy. It got there by owning the physical infrastructure competitors can't easily replicate. Landfills that took decades and mountains of paperwork to permit, hauling routes that have been locked in for years, and disposal facilities that new entrants simply cannot build fast enough to compete. In 2024 alone, Waste Management spent roughly $800 million acquiring smaller solid waste businesses, quietly consolidating an industry most people assume is too fragmented and unglamorous to matter. So, if numbers like this are surprising you so far, hit subscribe because this channel breaks down exactly how businesses like this actually make their money, the parts nobody bothers explaining. That consolidation strategy is the real story. Every small regional hauler that gets absorbed brings its existing customer contracts, its existing routes, and its existing landfill capacity with it. Waste Management isn't just picking up trash. It's slowly buying up the entire pipeline, from your curb to the final resting place of everything you throw away, and pricing itself accordingly at every stage along the route. The takeaway here isn't that Waste Management is a genius operator running some secret playbook. It's at owning physical, permitted, hard-to-replace infrastructure in a business people can't avoid using produces margins most industries would kill for. Here's what's coming. The company running almost the exact same playbook, generating almost $20 billion a year, that most people have never once heard of. And here's why it matters. One dominant company in an industry can look like a fluke. Two companies running the identical model at massive scale tells you the model itself is the reason it works, not the company running it. Republic Services, the second largest player in the space, closed out 2025 with just under $16.6 billion in revenue and net income of $2.14 billion. Its adjusted EBITDA margin landed at 32%. That's not a typo. Nearly a third of every dollar that comes in the door turns into operating profit before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization get subtracted. Republic runs the same fundamentals as Waste Management. Locked-in collection contracts, landfill ownership, and a steady stream of acquisitions, over $1 billion of them in 2025 alone, absorbing smaller regional operators and folding their routes and disposal capacity into the larger machine. What makes this genuinely interesting isn't just that these two companies exist. It's that between them, Waste Management and Republic Services represent roughly $40 billion in annual revenue from an activity most people associate with minimum wage labor and bad smells. The public perception of the industry and the actual economics of the industry have almost nothing to do with each other. Here's what's coming. What recycling actually is as a business once you strip away the environmental branding. And here's why it matters. Most people assume recycling is a cost companies absorb to look responsible. In reality, recycled material is a traded commodity, and that changes the entire calculation of who profits from your blue bin. When a hauling company collects your recycling, it isn't performing a public service out of goodwill. It's collecting raw material, sorting it, baling it, and selling it into commodity markets, the same way a mining company sells, or... In 2025, Republic Services reported an average recycled commodity price of $135 per ton sold, down $29 from the year before, which tells you something important. This market moves like any other commodity market, driven by global demand for paper, plastic, aluminum, and cardboard, not by public sentiment about sustainability. That price swing matters enormously to the companies running it. When commodity prices for recycled material rise, recycling becomes a genuine profit center. When they fall, as they did in 2025, recycling operations can turn into a cost the company has to manage carefully, and pricing to municipalities and customers adjust to compensate. Either way, the waste companies aren't losing money in the long run. They're pricing the risk into every contract they sign because they control both ends, the collection and the buyer relationships downstream. This is why the largest players have spent heavily on recycling automation, building materials recovery facilities that sort waste faster and cleaner with less labor. Every percentage point of purity added to a bale of recycled paper or plastic is money added to the price it sells for. Recycling, once you look past the school assembly version of the story, is a sorting and commodities business wearing an environmental mission as its marketing. Here's what's coming. How the same landfills charging tipping fees are now generating a second income stream out of the gas rotting waste naturally produces. And here's why it matters. Understanding this tells you where the entire industry is investing its future profits, and it's not where most people would guess. When organic waste breaks down in a landfill, it produces methane, a gas that used to be treated purely as an environmental liability to be burned off or vented. Waste Management and Republic Services have both been converting that liability into renewable natural gas, capturing the methane, processing it, and selling it into the energy market. Waste Management has completed 7 of a planned 20 renewable natural gas facilities as it continues building out this business line, and Republic Services brought 9 new renewable natural gas projects online in 2025 alone. This is genuinely one of the more elegant business moves in the entire industry. The raw material, decomposing trash, was already being paid for through tipping fees. The gas it produces was previously a cost and a regulatory headache. Now, it's a second revenue stream sitting on top of infrastructure the company already owns and has already been paid to operate. There's no new land to acquire and no new customer relationship to build. It's pure margin stacked on top of an existing asset. That's the pattern worth remembering from this entire segment. The biggest players in this industry don't chase new markets nearly as often as they extract a second and third source of profit from assets they already control. A landfill that charges to accept waste and sells the gas that waste produces is being monetized twice from a single hole in the ground. Here's what's coming. The entry points that exist below the level of billion-dollar public companies, the part of this industry an individual could realistically build toward. And here's why it matters. Understanding the giants is interesting. Understanding where the door actually is matters more if you're the kind of person who wants to eventually own something instead of just studying it from a distance. Most people can't build a landfill. The permitting alone can take a decade and involve fights with local communities that most operators simply lose before they start. But the industry has smaller entry points that don't require competing with waste management directly. Local hauling routes, dumpster rental businesses, junk removal services, and construction debris hauling are all pieces of this same economy operating at a scale an individual or a small operator can realistically reach. A regional hauling route, the kind that services a defined set of residential or commercial customers on a recurring contract, is a genuinely attractive small business asset for exactly the same reason the giants are attractive. Recurring revenue, a customer base that doesn't shop around often, and a service people are willing to pay for reliably because the alternative is trash piling up. This is precisely why Waste Management and Republic Services spend so aggressively acquiring these smaller operators instead of building new routes from scratch. Buying an existing route with existing customers is faster and cheaper than winning that same customer base one household at a time. The lesson underneath all of it is that this industry rewards ownership of something specific and defensible, a route, a landfill, a set of contracts, more than it rewards being clever about marketing. Every entry point into this business, from the biggest public company to the smallest regional hauler, is really the same asset repeated at different scales. control over where waste goes, and the ability to charge for it. Here's what's coming. The real barriers that keep this from being the obvious business everyone should be piling into. And here's why it matters. If a business generates margins like these, something has to be stopping more people from doing it. And understanding that barrier tells you whether this is actually achievable or just a nice story about somebody else's success. The first barrier is capital. Trucks are expensive. Landfill development is extraordinarily expensive, and recycling automation equipment can run into the tens of millions of dollars per facility. This isn't a business you start with a laptop and an idea. It's a business you start with heavy equipment, insurance, and enough cash reserves to survive slow seasons. The second barrier is regulation. Every landfill has to be permitted by state and often federal environmental agencies, and that process routinely takes years, assuming it succeeds at all. Communities frequently oppose new landfill sites outright, which is exactly why the existing landfills owned by Waste Management and Republic Services carry so much value. Nobody's building a meaningful number of new ones anytime soon, which makes the ones already permitted more valuable with every year that passes. The third barrier is consolidation itself. With the two largest players spending close to $2 billion combined on acquisitions in a single recent year, the easiest way for a small operator to succeed often isn't to compete with the giants directly. It's to build something worth being acquired by them. None of this means the opportunity isn't real. It means the opportunity looks completely different depending on where you're standing. At the top, it's a capital-intensive, slow-moving, highly regulated cash machine. At the bottom, it's a route business built on recurring customers and reliability. Both versions are legitimate. Neither one is easy, and that difficulty is exactly why the margins stay this good instead of getting competed away. So here's the actual picture. $1.5 trillion global industry, run by companies posting margins most sectors would envy, built entirely on an activity every person and every business on the planet is forced to participate in. Nobody has to be convinced to throw something away. They just need somewhere to put it, and somebody is always getting paid the moment they do. That's the pattern worth carrying with you. The least glamorous businesses are frequently the ones built on the most guaranteed demand, and guaranteed demand is worth more than almost anything else you can build a company around. Garbage isn't the only business that runs on something people barely think about and can't avoid using. There's another one sitting on ordinary street corners in almost every town in America, charging people to do something they have no real alternative to, and running on some of the leanest overhead of any business in the country. I've broken down exactly how it works, the real numbers behind it, and why quiet investors have been buying them up for years in the next video. Why laundromats are one of America's best cash businesses.